Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of Deal Talk. And man, I'm really excited about today. I think you can see that I really get excited when we're talking about Deal Talk because I really enjoy doing it. I really enjoy talking to the leaders and movers and shakers in our industry. And today, without exception, we have another great one with us, and that's Chris Peebles. And so, Chris, I want to say hello. And how about introducing yourself and telling us the name of your company and how long you've been in the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me, Terry. Name's Chris Peebles, based here in Florence, South Carolina, and name of my business is K2 Capital. And I guess I got in the industry about 3.5 years ago.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Yeah, I remember those times. I think at the time, Chris, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I guess I am a little bit. We were doing, we were just getting involved to building the academy. And so we weren't quite ready to roll that out. And you and I came together and met each other and kind of did a little mentorship there as you were kicking off your business, as I remember.
Yeah, absolutely. You were super helpful for me. This industry it can be complex at times, and
Yeah.
someone you can lean in on when you have questions is critical.
Yeah. So I think what I want to say to that is this. I might have helped you back then, but I want our listeners and our audience to know that recently I'm the one who's been calling you. If you think about it, remember I needed a hotel lender, and you said, "Hey, I've got one for you down in Texas," and you introduced me to them, and they're working with me on a deal or two. So, I think that's part of what some folks that are in our industry don't get is that it's a you help me and then I'm going to help you, type of a relationship. If you try to hold everything to yourself and keep your arms around everything and stay quiet, I'm not telling you who my lender is, or I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing, then you're not going to be able to grow. And I think that's what it's about is people growing in our industry. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And, Terry, when you're asking me, I don't even think twice about it. It's for me, I know that I don't even have to know anything about the deal. You know what you're doing. You're going to ask the right questions. You're going to go to that lender with the right paperwork if it makes sense and
Right.
write accordingly. So for me, that's an easy ask. There's no reason that I need to be involved other than, hey, you might want to check out this lender.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. So today I really want to talk about kind of some general topics, Chris, and what I'd really like to talk about first is kind of a state of the industry, and so I'd really want to ask you, tell me how your deal flow is right now.
Strong and varied, very varied. So, I'd say on the small end of the spectrum right now, I'm working on a DSCR loan for 5 single-family homes. That was interesting because the guy came to me originally looking for really construction capital, and just over conversation, he was short on liquidity and the money to put in to that deal to get a construction loan done for him. And just in conversation, learned he had over $3.5 million worth of single-family homes that he had paid cash for, all unencumbered. And that was
Wow.
uh, as you know, there's a sweet spot in the industry for single-family rentals. Cash out
Yep.
finance, very competitive, can move very quickly, which is what he needed. And so that was a fun one to do. We're on the tail end of that one. Should close probably next week. To an SBA 7A that I'm doing. This is the third one for a franchise group that I worked with. Over 2 years ago for the first one. An ABL consolidation for a $60 million manufacturing company, and a couple of bridge situations where the business got themselves into some short-term MCA type debt, expensive
Yeah.
debt, and it's crushing them. They're good businesses. They just didn't know what they didn't know. And now
Yeah.
they're in a cash flow crunch and seeking to get out. And that's become more challenging because you know that SBA cut off the ability to refinance that kind of expensive debt. So you got to be very sensitive in how you work with it. So,
Yeah. We here in our office, we have a local company that, a medical company, and that's what happened to them. They got hooked into, starting with an MCA and they ended up with 4 of them, and now they're getting a substantial amount of money drafted out of their account daily, and it's just crushing them, and it's close to putting them out of business. And the fact that this would be an easy SBA deal if not for those MCAs. So we're working on getting them a bridge, us doing a bridge through our bridge company, and then paying off those MCAs so they can then refinance and do an SBA loan. Because I'm not saying that MCAs are bad. I'm saying they absolutely have to be managed properly. And when we see businesses, and Chris, you may be seeing this too, when we see businesses that are stacking MCAs, they are headed for trouble. And it's something that you really have to watch, because there's no, used to, the alternative honestly was we'd refinance them into an SBA 7A, right?
Right.
The SBA, in talking with some folks from the SBA, we discovered that those were the biggest loan delinquencies in the SBA's portfolio. So everybody says that the SBA just, changes things, when they want to. That's not true. They looked at the data, and those were the loans that weren't performing.
I don't doubt it. It's tempting money when it's quick. You take on an SBA loan, refinance it, 6 months down the line, you take on another one, and when they're taking out money out of your bank account every week, it's crushing.
Yeah. So we're seeing that. So it sounds like you have a very good variety of deals that are flowing through, your company right now.
But I absolutely do. I hear a lot in the industry about, focus on one particular, whether it be fix and flips, or whether it be bridge, or whether it be, refinance or ABL. And I get that. But, for me, I like to think of myself more as an advisor than just a broker. And
right.
Pivot, when a developer thinks they want to get construction capital, when the easier route and the more makes sense route is to tap into their already existing assets they don't know anything about. You know anything about 30-year DSCR loans and how competitive it can be, and how you can get some very competitive capital out of this property. It's far cheaper than a construction loan. So
yeah.
That's the way I like to view my role, is more of an advisor than just a broker, thinking beyond the transaction, what's going to happen next, and long-term vision, not just the short-term transactional vision.
Yeah, a comment about that is that I've always tried to tell our brokers, we actually have an academy class going on this week, and I want to talk about some indicators with you here in just a minute. But I try to tell our people is, when I started out, I tried to be everything. I tried to have 7 or 8 or 9 different, deals that, to be an expert on, and I just couldn't. But what I could focus on is 3, 4, or 5, products really well, and become and learn those really well. Now with AI the way it is and things like that, you get a deal in, you're not sure, go talk to AI about it. The heck, they'll even identify lenders for you, if you ask it to. But I think if you're a broker and you're trying to live on one product, you're going to starve, because at some point in time, that piece that you're focused on, whether it's DSCR loans or just SBA 7A, at some point in time, they're going to freeze up a little bit, and when they do, you're going to be stuck not knowing other avenues. And the other thing is what you said, Chris, is you got to be able to pivot. I'll never forget, the car dealer that I worked with, and I wrote about it in our book called Yes. He thought he needed a line of credit.
Right.
He didn't need a line of credit. He needed to refinance his real estate because he had too much equity in his real estate. And so we were able to do that and give him the cash that he thought he needed in a line of credit. So you're right. Sometimes our clients need us to be that key advisor, right? Instead of just being a broker trying to make a commission.
That's right.
Yeah. So, is there anything about how you do business that you've had to change in order to adapt to the market that we're in?
I'm loving AI right now, but I'm very careful about it. Not using it as a crutch so much as a tool. You still have to know what you're doing. I mean, AI makes so many mistakes that they even put that disclaimer on ChatGPT, Claude, everything else. So if you don't know what you're looking for and you don't know what you're doing, you got to be very, very careful. So where AI has helped me is in my processes. For example, I've got a intake tracker that I use as Excel spreadsheet and helps keep that up to point. And I can quickly tell a client, in 30 seconds what's needed, whether I have it, and then more importantly, even why it's needed. And that tends to
Yeah.
motivate them and say, okay, this is why I have to provide 23 tax returns. This is why I have to provide a personal financial statement. So when they
Yeah.
understand the reasoning behind it a little bit, it tends to motivate them. And if I tried to do that, 2 years ago, that would have been Chris
Yeah.
putting on a spreadsheet for 30 minutes, and I just didn't have the time to do that. So that's just kind of one of the ways I've been using AI is to help keep on point. But I still think you need to know what you're doing.
Yeah. Two things on that. One is today I asked AI a question and I wasn't sure about the answer it gave me. I turned right around and asked it the very same question and it gave me a different answer.
Yeah.
Okay. As far as the numbers, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting, right? Because I
Right.
mean, back to back, it gave me different numbers, and so which one's real,
Right.
and so you just get, like you said, it's a tool. It can't be a crutch,
That's right.
And in class today, today was a day that we bring Micah in to the academy, and she goes over a credit memo and a package that we sent, to one of our bank partners, one of our recent deals. And it's just like it clicked with the students. Oh, that's why you need 3 years tax returns, because they're seeing, what the debt DSCR was for each of the years. They're seeing 23, they're seeing 24, they're seeing 25, and they're seeing what it is year to date so far. So it all makes sense to them, is why we need all that. So I think that's important too. We met, I think it was about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago. So we've kind of built a little bit of a relationship. I mean, you've got your thing going on, we've got our thing going on over here. But tell me what you think to a new broker, or even an experienced broker. What would you say the importance is of having a community that kind of can be there to help when you need it?
You
What do
know,
you think about that?
this business is a relationship business, 100%. And when I came in, I knew enough to be dangerous. I had been an owner operator of a business for 20 plus years. I've
Yeah.
from that lens. But and I learned a little bit at a class I took, but it really kind of takes some experience to get in and understand how different lenders look at capital differently and how to package a deal and who you can lean on and trust. And you were part of that, and I appreciated it. I had several lenders that I connected with that also helped me, and this is why this works, and this is why that works.
Right.
Not everybody will do that,
No.
and I think it's important. You're not just on an island somewhere trying to figure it all out by yourself. I think that's a key to being successful quickly.
Yeah. I think that's really important. I'll never forget, I've talked about it a lot, and he knows I use his name. Mike Sneeden was a big, big reason that I'm successful, in my career, because he didn't help me with just CMBS loans. He would help me on an SBA loan, which he was never going to look at because he didn't fund them, you
Yeah,
know. But he poured into me enough and cared about me enough because he knew I was going to send him every CMBS opportunity I had. I was coming to him with it. So he wanted me to be successful in other areas of lending. And I think lenders that do that, man, we certainly do need to keep them in our community and in our group. And you're right, we do have several of those. Um, what about your contacts that you make in some of these, like the CLBA? We got our conference coming up in November. I think in the 13 years I've been in this industry, I think I've missed a national conference twice.
yeah.
Once I was working on a really, really big deal and I couldn't get away. I can't remember why the other one that I missed. But what do you think is the importance of attending a conference and networking and meeting some people that are in our industry?
I think it's huge. I remember last year, of course, leading up to the conference, they had the attendees, and there's some reach out. from the lenders, and I took a few of those meetings, and I got more from that than probably anything. And I'm going to do that more of that this year.
Yeah.
Sitting down and having face-to-face conversations with lenders and understanding what they're all about, whether you have a deal for them or not. I mean, ideally, you'd like to have a deal that you can talk about live at the conference, but maybe
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with that type of capital, sit down and talk to somebody who's willing to reach out and talk to you just to learn more about what are they looking for. And it just helps you understand that. To me, that's the biggest value of those type of conferences. I love walking around and talking to people and everything else, and changing cards. But when I can actually sit down face to face with somebody and really connect with them and learn about what they like and what they don't like and why,
Yeah.
that's the biggest value to me.
Yeah. I think it's just as important to know what not to send a lender
That's right.
as it is to know, what they're looking for, so that you don't waste their time and you don't aggravate them, or, get them to where they see your number pop up and go, oh, not him again.
Right.
And unfortunately, I can tell you as a lender, I have some of those brokers. I see them call and I go, man, this is going to be 30 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back, but you still try to take the call. You still try to help them, and try to get them on track, because, the goal is to get everybody in a win-win situation. And what I mean by that is the client needs to win, the broker needs to win, and the lender needs to win. And if we can do that, then it works for us. So I want to talk just a second about, and this is not on, we didn't send you any of this pre, so you don't know anything that I'm coming to, but I get a lot of calls from lenders and brokers, and they're asking me, they're saying, hey, what are you seeing in the market out there? And so I'm frank with it. I tell them what we're seeing, as a bidco, what kind of deal flow we're seeing. And right now our deal flow, I don't know if you saw, Chris, we just announced a major rate reduction, a new tier in our bridge lending, where we'll go down all the way to 11.95. And that may sound expensive to a lot of people, but in a bridge lending environment, that's a pretty low rate, and then we can even drop on really, really quality deals. We can even drop our origination fee all the way to 3 points. So that's been a big improvement, for us. And again, it's for our top tier clients and all. But when they ask me what I'm seeing, I wonder if they're looking at the right indicators. And as an industry, part of our training this week, one of the things that we had a class on today was seeing through the lender's lens. In other words, seeing what a lender is seeing. And I think sometimes brokers, we have the tools available to us, and we just don't take the time to stop and look at them. And I want to give you 3 things that I look at. And you may look at them, you may not. But one of the things is, the Treasury yield curve. When that, and we're talking about the 2-year yield, versus the 10-year yield. And they talk about sometimes it being upside down. There's a time that when it gets upside down, they say, as a country, we're headed to a recession. So what does that mean? What that means is when the 10-year yield curve, is a lower rate, the 10-year Treasury, than the 2-year Treasury. So it should cost, less money if you're only doing a loan for 2 years than it does if you're doing the loan for 10 years. And that's the thing, is that, right now today, the 10-year Treasury is at 4.63, the 2-year Treasury is at 4.26. So it's as they say, it's a perfect world. It's a positive yield curve. So that's positive. That means that lenders, ought to be lending and doing okay. When it's upside down like it's been, lenders get nervous. And so that's an indicator that brokers, can look at. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. I don't know if that's something that you look at, Chris, or not. So,
Perhaps I should, but if I'm being honest, I really don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know where rates are today, and
Yeah.
the reason why I pay attention to those is a lot of my work, it seems, is aligning the client's expectations. If they're
Yeah.
in and expecting a 6% bridge loan from a big co, that's not aligned. And so knowing where that lender is and where they're likely going to price it, to me, practically, that's where I really pay attention to where rates are.
Yeah, and I think that's important to us. It's one of the things we teach in our academy class is, what you just said is trying to manage the client's expectations. And you have your first meeting with the client, and the client tells you, I'm looking for a bridge loan. It needs to be at 6%, and I'm not paying any origination fee. I can tell you how I handle that meeting. I'm not going to be able to help you, sir or ma'am.
Right.
That's not out there. There's nobody doing that. And so sometimes what brokers I feel do is they just take the order from the client
Mm-hmm.
and then they start calling lenders saying, I need a 6% bridge loan. Well, it's not out there. And they run through their lender list. Okay. And all the lenders tell them it's not out there. And then they either don't call the client back or they are strong enough to call the client back and say, hey, that's not out there. And then the client bows up and says, well, that's what I'm going to take. And so I'm not doing business with you. And then when he reaches out to the next broker, you know what he says? He says, I need a bridge loan. I know it's going to be somewhere around 12% and probably, 3 or 4 points of origination. Can you help me?
Right.
So all the first broker did is set the expectations. And now the client goes out and says, hey, these are my expectations,
Right.
because they don't want to be embarrassed. Whereas I think if you tell the client up front what reality is, hey, there's not a 6% rate on a bridge loan that I know of, out there anywhere. And you, like you said, you manage the client's expectations, then typically you can help them. And in the end, they're going to appreciate that. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. You have to be transparent from the very get go, setting those expectations from both the lender and the borrower. That's your job.
Yeah.
And that's your value, really. It is aligning those expectations, showing them what's out there, making sure everybody's on the same page, and then how do you get it done? How do you get it over the finish line?
Yeah.
I use I'm using the phrase a lot: slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
And making sure that everything is aligned, including customers' expectations. All the paperwork's there, everything's preliminary underwritten, so that when it gets to a lender's desk, it's with the right lender and it moves fast. That's how you move
Yep.
deals fast. Where I think some brokers want to grab just the initial talking points of a deal and push it to as many people as they can, and they don't understand
Mm-hmm.
what documents need to support it and why, and what the lender will be looking for, and ultimately gets to a lender who might be interested. They hold on to it for a couple of weeks, and then why can't he get us his tax returns? And
Right.
they never
Yeah.
asked. And I
Yeah.
didn't file this year. Okay, well, that's a dead deal.
Yeah.
And so slowing down to speed up has kind of been my motto lately.
Yeah. We had a broker tell us this week, he's got a client. We're trying to do a bridge loan for him. They haven't filed taxes in 2 years, and it wasn't a red flag to the broker. And I'm like, we can't help them, man. They got to file taxes,
That's right.
And well, they didn't make any money, so they didn't file. Yeah, Uncle Sam doesn't care about that.
That's
So,
right.
so let me ask you this, and we're gonna close, and I'll let you go. And I know you got a lot going on. I know that you're busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to be with us and talk to some of the other, share some of your experience with the other brokers out there. Been in the business, approaching 4 years now.
Mhm.
Headed back to the conference in Indianapolis in November. Okay, what are some tips or some, I don't want to say tricks, but I guess tricks that you might tell a new broker coming to the convention to plan to be able to maximize their experience at the convention? What is something you might share with them?
Well, I touched on it earlier. I'd say take those meetings. You're going to get some emails leading up to the conference from lenders that will be there, and they're not sales pitches. They want to meet the brokers who know what they're doing. So sit down. I mean, don't stack it up so much where you don't have time to do anything else, but
Right.
strategically look at who is going to be there, what you're actively working right now. Take some of those meetings. I would say 2, maybe 3 a day if you can, and
Yeah.
and sit down with them, maybe with some active deals. And the other thing is, take the time, whether it be at the bar or go out to dinner with somebody that, you know, that's been in the industry for a while, that's seasoned, and just talk to them, learn what's worked for them, what hasn't, where they struggle, what's working really well for them. To me, that's the value that I get out of it more than anything else.
Okay. Well, Chris, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today for this edition of Deal Talk. And I can't wait to see you in November in Indianapolis. And we'll have to maybe hoist a cocktail or so at the Monday Night Football event. All right.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Well, thanks, Chris. Hey, everybody. This has been Terry Luker along with Chris Peebles today for Deal Talk. Have a great day.